Helps if you put the microphone on. Welcome everyone to the Executive Member for Transport decision session on Tuesday, 22nd of March 2022. For the benefit of people who are in the room, just a reminder of the fire procedures. The fire exit route is the way that you came in. You may need to be accompanied through some of the doors, so a member of the staff will obviously support you at that if we need to. I'm not expecting a fire alarm. If that route for any reason isn't available, there is a fire exit through these doors here as well, but you will need to be accompanied by staff in that. If when you've spoken you wish to leave, you can do that and a member of staff will assist you out of the building. So that's the fire procedures. Just if you encourage people to switch their phones to silent for duration of the meeting, if at all possible. Second item on the agenda is declarations of interests. I would say that I don't have any pecuniary or prejudicial interests. However, I wish to note that in relation to item 4E1, the location is somewhere fairly close to my house, not outside it, but they are the nearest shops that I walk to regularly. And in relation to E2, there's some reference there to my views. I would say that this proposal is not in any way related to any cycle schemes for Fulford Road, so I don't consider that I have a prejudicial interest in determining that item. The next item I have is the minutes of the meeting on the last meeting. A couple of minor amendments to that meeting. Just on page 5, I think it should say uninterrupted routes rather than interrupted routes. On page 11, there's reference to reduction in speeds rather than speed limits on Great North Way. So I've made those corrections on the minutes, and with those changes, I think there was another one where it was a reference to Bootham. Blossom Gate, which it should actually be Blossom Street. So with those corrections, I'm happy to approve those minutes. I should just introduce I think people have got nameplates in front of them, but just so that people are aware, the officers supporting the decision today and advising me in those decisions. We've got Dave, do you want to just introduce that?
I'm Dave Atkinson. I'm the Head of Highways and Transport at Council. Apologies, because of COVID issues, the Director's not able to attend, so I'll do my best to answer the questions in his stead.
Thank you. Darren, do you want to?
Hi, I'm Darren Hobson, Traffic Management Team Leader. My job title seems to be out of date on me. That's fine.
Thank you. And Robert, you.
Robert Flintoff, Democratic Services. I'm recording the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you. And thanks for the technicians in the background as well for their support. So I'll move on now to the next item is public speakers. We have a number of people registered to speak today, some in person and some remote. And for each of the speakers, I'd remind you that you have up to 3 minutes. You don't have to take all 3 minutes if you don't need to. I have also had some written representations which we've read prior to the meeting. So the first speaker I have registered to speak is Councillor Waters. Doesn't relate to an item on the agenda. It relates to the general remit of the Executive Member for Transport decision sessions. Is Councillor Waters there? Can you hear us, Councillor Waters? We can't hear you. You may need to...
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. Well, it's that time of year again. Spring's in the air, and York Council staff are back on with daubing double yellow lines in all directions. I note with interest many of the resident objection comments in various wards to the double yellow line proposals in agenda item 4. Many of those residents clearly see and articulate that these parking restrictions achieve nothing other than to move a problem further along the highway. Of course, I'm speaking to highlight once again how encouraged I have been by the residents in Osborwick and Merton who have opposed similar proposed double yellow lines on Tranby Avenue to alleviate parking problems expressly created by yourself as executive member and officers. I look forward to bringing a number of those residents to the April decision session when the petition calling on this council to solve the parking problem you have deliberately created and not merely to move it along the highway as you are looking to do today in other wards. I hope to come to the meeting in April with a report produced by officers detailing how university-related problem parking has been solved by utilising spare capacity on the park and ride site for a campus shuttle bus connection or park and stride initiative, and, of course, relaxation of university parking restrictions and charges on their own wide-open, virtually empty car parks to get problem parking off residential streets. By expanding the Badger Hill residents parking scheme, you didn't solve a problem, you just dumped it into another community. A community and ward councillor that's not going to be fooled with double yellow line or res park stupidity. Failure to introduce the obvious and common sense solutions to this problem will, in my view, reinforce my opinion that dumping the problem in Osborwick and Merton has been a deliberate, calculated, malevolent act, although I would welcome being proved wrong on the 19th of April. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll consider those when we come to the 19th of April. So the second speaker, I don't know, do we have Adrian Scott? No, okay, we don't have him at the moment. If he appears, we'll take that. So the third speaker I've got read on my list is Jeffrey Norton. Do you want to come up to the desk at the front, if you can do that? And when you're sort of ready to start, there's the one button that says MIC. You press that and you'll be able to be heard. Do you want to start when you're ready?
Good morning. Yeah. I'm concerned about the parking on Gale Lane, which you're saying you're going to put a 15-minute restriction on outside the shop at McCall's. Gale Lane is double yellow lined all the way down Gale Lane. I live opposite the shop. I've got no parking. I suffer from osteoarthritis. I've had 2 knees replaced and I'm waiting for my ankle to be replaced. I have got nowhere to park at all. My next door neighbour, he has carers in 4 times a day. Where are they going to park if you put these restrictions on? Because, like you say, there's just nowhere. I know it's used, I know the police and the ambulance and the fire engines use it because it's a main road, but we haven't got anywhere to park at all. So I've been there since 2010. We have never, ever, ever had a problem with parking out there. And it's only since McCall's and Morrison's have taken over that they've like sort of bullied you in saying this belongs to us. Well, I went to the highways department and they went, no, it doesn't. They said they only own up to the pavement and everything else belongs to the highway department. They've put A signs out, which we've complained about, which one of them fell over and damaged our car, which McCall's ended up paying for the damage. But it's, you know what I mean? We have just got, I've asked the council to put a drop curb in at our property and they're saying it has to go through a grant. You know what I mean? I can only walk about 50, 75 yards and then I'm in absolute agony and pain.
Can I just clarify, is it your own property or is it?
No, it's a council owned property.
Yeah, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, but we've never had a problem before the people who use the shop. And the size of the wagons that are coming at like 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and Sunday, refrigeration wagons going, you know what I mean? It's a residential area and they're waking us up at all hours of the day.
Right.
And it's, you know what I mean?
Well, thank you very much for your comments, and the process is that we'll consider those when we get to that item on the
Yeah.
agenda, but we'll take that into consideration.
Yeah.
When we
I
make
mean,
a
it's like you
decision.
say, my next door neighbour,
Yeah,
he's housebound and he relies on carers 4 or 5 times a day.
yeah. Okay, thank you
All
very
right.
much for your comments.
Thank you.
So the next speaker I've got is Mr. David Burke.
Yes.
Do you want to come and, if it's not already on, if you just press the button for the microphone. It's,
Right. Hi, I'm representing the residents, majority of the residents of Landale Wood Road. We have inherent problems with vehicles, usually large delivery vehicles, parking on the junctions and so on. There's a proposal gone forward for double yellow lines, what I support because it is a start and a positive start. The main issue is health and safety of pedestrians and vehicle users, as the 2 junctions on the Landale Wood Road are both obstructed by these vehicles parking on the junctions, what is contravening the highway code. I've spoken to the police say it's the councils, and the council say it's the police. If anybody on this table today can confirm parking the obstructing junctions or parking the pavement, who should deal with that?
if there aren't double yellow lines, it is the police,
Thank you.
unfortunately.
I'll remind my community support officer.
And they obviously may have to deal with it in response in terms of obstructing the footway, if that's the case.
I am aware in West Yorkshire and Wetherby that vehicles are being fined £30 for parking on the pedestrian. But going back to the original point, I support the proposal so far. Thank
Okay,
you.
right. So
Okay.
that's helpful to know. So you basically you're speaking in support of the
Yeah, please. Yeah,
proposals.
it's a start. It's not perfect, but it is a good
Okay.
start. Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay. Thank you. So for the next speaker I've got is Richard Siddle. Is there Richard Siddle here? Do you want to- Siddle, sorry. Well, I get various. I'm used to getting various pronunciation of my name. So
Quickly first ask, when will the decision be made? Will it be today?
yeah,
So
I
here and now?
will actually be making the decision in this meeting. Yeah,
Lovely,
with
thank
advice
you.
from officers. Yeah.
Could I just say, please bear with me, because I've been diagnosed with quite severe anxiety, so
Sure.
even being here today is quite a thing.
Yeah.
So if you don't, please
That's
bear
all right.
with me.
That's all right. Can
Yeah,
you just tell me which particular application it is
It's
you're relating to?
the short street that's between Tedder Road and Aspen Croft.
Right. Do you happen to know which? Does anyone know which reference
says-
number it is?
I've
Just
got that. I mean, I don't know if that's of any assistance or not, but. So we're all right with that then, so we know the right thing.
okay. That's all right. It's just helpful when we get to the item. Make sure I'm talking about the right one.
Okay. I'm here to support the yellow lines being put down. It's something that we've been discussing for getting on for 4 years now, and today is the day really.
Mhm.
It's the only access route from Tedder Road into vehicle access, sorry, into Tedder Road, from Tedder Road into Aspen Croft, Waterman Close and Waterman Court, sorry, and where we live on Minter Close. So there's probably about 50-ish properties down there.
Mhm.
And this short stretch of road is used as basically as a car park.
Mm.
It's very, very difficult if you were coming in from Tedder Road in towards Aspen Croft, because of the parked vehicles on the junction, and because there's a slight dip in the hill, you have to cross the carriageway and you can't see.
Mhm.
And vehicles coming in the opposite direction obviously can't see you. So the yellow lines hopefully will, alleviate that. Also, some of the people that park on that stretch of road. They also park on the, you know, they're on the curb as well, on the pathway. They also have driveways themselves that they don't use. 2-car driveways that are never used, and the cars are yet parked on the highway and also on the footpath. What makes it worse is there's a telephone exchange box on there, which sticks out probably about 30 centimetres. So the footpath is reduced by 30 centimetres, and then you add a car parked onto the footpath as well. Makes it very, very difficult. So that's the sort of vehicle side of things. This particular street, I don't know whether did you say you were familiar with it? This particular... Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, that's handy then. It's used by quite a lot of mums and dads taking the kids from the sort of North Foxwood area up the hill and to Westfield School, primary school. And obviously you'll appreciate with the reduction in the footpath, people with buggies, you know, a couple of kids in tow, what they have to do is then leave the footpath and cross the road just to get to the other side, and they can't see. And obviously, as I've just discussed, vehicles can't see them coming neither. There's one lady who was has a double buggy with kids in tow, and obviously she can't see. But one of the main things, sorry, I do waffle.
So if you can just draw your comments to close a bit.
The last thing we have had, it's not been very recently, thankfully, but emergency vehicles getting in. I used to be a bus driver and a heavy goods vehicle driver, so I tend to see things slightly differently. The last time we had a fire in the close, the fire engine got in all right, but I understand that if there was vehicles parked as they're parking now, I wouldn't be able to drive a fire engine in there. And fire engines are relatively small compared to the vehicles that I used to drive. So I would like you to bear that in mind, because it is the only access into Minter Close, Waterman Court and Askencroft. There's no other entrance unless you're in.
So in conclusion, you're very much you're in support of us taking action on this.
I would, absolutely in support of those lines going down, because something nasty is going to happen at some point, and I just don't want to be the, you know.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I do waffle.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. It's useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the next speaker I have is Heather Lord, who is ringing in. Is that right? Can you hear us, Heather?
Yes, I can. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Do you want to make your contributions to the meeting? And also, if you can make clear which particular set of yellow lines you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the yellow lines on Landlewood Road. It's right outside our house. I've been in touch with the council already, asking if we could widen our drive, and we've been told we can't. So we've only got we only have 2 vehicles for our household, but there's only room for 1 car on the drive. We've been told we're not allowed to widen our drive, so we're a bit stuck really. We won't be able to park outside our own house, which isn't ideal. So yeah, that's why we're objecting to the double yellow lines. There's houses on the street that have been converted into flats, which obviously the council have allowed. So they have multiple vehicles. Which is just a minority of people that abuse the parking system, but we're going to suffer for it.
So can you just clarify which road it is you said? Landlewood Road. Okay, okay. That's all you want to contribute? Thank you.
Well, just that, yeah, we weren't included in the original letter to say that you were putting double yellow lines outside our house, which, yeah, obviously I'm not happy about that because it does directly affect us. And so where can we park our vehicles if we can't park them outside our own house?
Thank you. We'll take your comments into consideration when we come to that item. Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Andrew Mortimer, who is also on the line. Can you hear us, Andrew?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Right, thank you. Do you want to make your comments? I believe this is again in relation to item 4. So if you can specify which particular scheme it is you're referring to, be helpful.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's item K2, which is the double yellow lines at the junction of Moore Avenue and Oswaldwick Lane. I submitted the objection to this because it's a much bigger issue in this area that needs you to take action. And the implementation of these yellow lines in isolation will, if anything, make the problem worse. City of York Council is in receipt of a petition from local residents asking you to take action to deal with the issue of parking and safe use of footpaths in the area. At present, cars park on the front footpath, block access for pedestrians, wheelchair users and parents with buggies. Buses can't use the designated stops, and on bin day the situation becomes much worse. Added to this, the problem with cars dropping off, parking on yellow lines while dropping off and picking up from the local primary school. This small section of yellow lines, as proposed, will not help in isolation. So if you are to agree with the officer's recommendation, I'd be grateful if you will also bring forward for consideration as soon as possible the petition from local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll consider that when we come to that item. Next speaker I have is Councillor Callum Taylor, also on the line. Is he there?
Good morning, Councillor de Gorn. Can you hear me?
We can, yes. If you'd like to make, as with everyone else, make reference to particular schemes that you're commenting on, would be helpful.
Yeah, will do. So I'm talking about item 4, Annex J, which deals with the Holgate Ward proposals. And this is specifically with regards to the item labelled J1, which covers Springfield Avenue and Beach Avenue.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'll keep it short and sweet for a change. This is not a straightforward case due to the area and the existing res park zone having some unusual characteristics. But this proposal seeks to help current residential parking pressures in a way that is neither punitive nor, going off the council's current timescales, very time consuming for residents. So it's hoped that this modest move to lift restrictions for just these 2 bays will allow a little bit more breathing space to alleviate a material amount of parking pressure for residents. While the status quo is currently unworkable in this area and does need dealing with, residents in the area, both those supporting this and against it, need to be aware that if this proposal does not work, then more drastic measures may be necessary. It would be premature to jump to those, though, before seeing how this initial proposal works in the first instance. So, Councillor de Gorn, I'd like you to do as your officers recommend with this one and implement it as advertised. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Helpful comments. Consider that item when you come to the decision on that. So the next speaker I have is Mr. Andrew Spittlehouse, who I believe is here. Want to come to the table? If you want to just press the.
It's already on.
Is it? Okay.
Am I allowed to give some photographic evidence here for anyone to look at if you're interested?
Thank you.
What it's all about, really.
Can you just tell me which one?
All right.
So we're talking about 7th Avenue, are we?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I know when.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, basically, it's not straightforward, as it sounds like a few of your problems aren't. The complaints I've had, I think, stemmed from the one-stop shop round the corner complaining that the lorry, or the lorries, delivery lorries, can't all get out of the little alleyway that's there, which is, in all honesty, too small for that size of lorry to be going down anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the original one, the proposed double yellow lines, As you can see by some of the pictures there that I've produced, there's nowhere else to park because due to the students down the street and people with more and more houses in their cars in their houses, there's just nowhere else to go. There's a school round the corner one way, the shops round the corner the other way. So in all honesty, there is just nowhere. And all of this comes from the one-stop shop or its owners or drivers, whoever, complaining about not being able to get out of an alley, which in all honesty isn't big enough for them to be down there anyway. For them to exit that alley, they have to drive on the footpaths, which again, I've shown on my pictures when there is no cars parked there, that they have to come on the footpaths. And in one or two of the pictures, there's ladies and their children, you know, push chairs on the footpath. And as, like I said earlier, there's a school round the corner.
Just if I can interrupt for a minute, can you just, on this, whereabouts is the alley that you're referring to? Sorry, just be helpful. Oh, I see. So it's that route there. Okay, yeah, thank you.
No bother. So you can probably see that from to exit, they have to drive on that bit of pavement, and just round the corner, there's a school. And not only is there just a school, but I've got children myself who like to play, like to ride their bikes and stuff like that. And as you can imagine, it's just not safe.
So can I just clarify, what is your view in terms of what's proposed?
I would like there to be I think for the parking issue, I would like the double yellows not to be there because I don't think it'll actually do a lot of good. Yes, it'll allow the wagons to be able to turn out, but they'd still have to drive on the pavement, which is illegal and wrong. It's illegal, it's a health and safety issue. It's not really the answer. I don't know what is the answer, but that is not the answer.
Okay, that's our job then, not yours, but okay. Thank you very much for your comments.
Sorry, can I just mention that the milk lorry and several other lorries do unload at the front of the shop. I don't know whether that's an option.
Yeah, I could look at that. Thank you very much for your comments. So the next speaker I have is Councillor Kilbane, who is ringing in, I believe, again on item 4. Can you hear us, Councillor Kilbane?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Councillor de Gaulle?
We can, thank you. Can you again just explain which particular parking scheme it is you're referring to?
Sure. There's a couple, and then there's a couple of other agenda items I'll be speaking to. So, with regard to item 4, the annual review traffic regulation orders, I'm also speaking on behalf of Councillor Crawshaw, who I'm afraid can't make the meeting today. For openness and transparency, I must point out that Councillor Crawshaw lives in a res park zone that will be affected by scheme M2. Firstly, scheme M1 is not what residents asked for. They're disappointed that the scheme does not consider moving the parking from one end of the bay to the other as requested. They ask that you do nothing rather than implement this proposal. Should you be minded to implement the proposal against the residents' wishes, then a review into extending the north end of the affected parking bay should be undertaken immediately. Similarly with M2, I echo my ward colleagues' comments that I've received no complaints reparking in this area, and as the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The majority of local residents are against this change. There is an issue with coach parking, but as residents point out, the proposed changes will have no effect as coaches will continue to park on the double yellow lines, which CYCP is willing to overlook. Residents themselves are much keener to see enforcement of the 20-mile-an-hour zone than alterations to the res park bays. And again, should this decision go through, I also support Councillor Crawshaw's proposal that a review of the hours of operation for R48 be instigated immediately as part of the decision. On item 5, city centre access, others have and will speak more eloquently on the insults that the Liberal Democrat and Green Party continue to add to the shame of barring disabled people from the city centre, let alone the abuse of their human rights. This continues to be a stain on the City of York and one that we will put right as soon as we're in administration in 2023. But blue badge holders should not have to wait for a Labour admin. Suggestions will be made to you today and I urge you to take them up. With regard to item 7, the Transport Capital Programme and the active active travel schemes. This is a programme that has never been prioritised and continues to slip away. The past performance of the Lib Dem Greens means we've no confidence whatsoever that the current programme will be delivered on the published schedule. And once again, it's an ad hoc programme, whereas what we need is a joined up transport plan. But of course, the Lib Dem Green administration are clearly trying to ensure that no meaningful plan comes forward before the 2023 elections. So if people want all residents and visitors to be able to access our city centre under a joined up sustainable mobility plan for the whole city, then the way forward is clear. Residents need to vote Labour at the next elections. Thank you.
That concludes the party political broadcast. Thank you for your contributions. I will now move on to the next speaker, who is Gwen Swinburne. It says in person, she's not. She hasn't. Okay, sorry. Obviously, she isn't here today. So I then move to the next speaker, which is on item 5, and that is Miss Flick Williams on remote, I believe.
Good morning.
Good morning. Would you like to make your contributions to this meeting?
I'd hoped to speak in person today, but in light of being clinically vulnerable against raging COVID infection, I must do so remotely. So I should like you to picture me in my wheelchair holding up a copy of the Martin Higgett Associates report. This is a comprehensive piece of work for which you have no doubt paid a considerable sum of council taxpayers' money. We don't know how much because the FOI request is unanswered. Just because you do not like its conclusions is not a reason to bury it. The work is done. Stop trying to reinvent the wheel by constantly asking disabled people's groups what they think about this, that, or the other. It is a cynical exploitation of disabled people's time and energy, which they are expected to give for nothing. And are any of them members of the National Register of Access Consultants? Jane Simpson, who worked on the MHA report, is. So the only possible reason for repetition must be to get a different result from people unqualified to give it. The report you already have sets out what you need to do according to government guidance, which you are not following in any case, as I pointed out at Executive in February without reply. Your press release says these improvements set out our desire to ensure that the city centre is safe and welcoming for all. How can this be so when your Equalities Impact Assessment, version 3 as I follow it, recognises that for some disabled people, there can be no mitigation? So please stop using the word all when you have already accepted that some are excluded, left behind, and are permanently shut out of their own city. Smoke and mirrors at every turn. I can tell you that after just 1 year of rattling over the surfaces in the foot streets in my powered wheelchair, it's turning it into junk. It cost nearly £4,000 and I cannot afford to replace it against a backdrop of out of control energy costs. So quite what miracles you expect Shop Mobility to perform with a mere £10,000 is beyond me. I cannot begin to cover all the problems contained within this report in 3 minutes, 3 hours possibly. So I will conclude with a quotation from an access officer from another authority whom I consulted over the proposed new post. They said, this person, regardless of gender, will need to arrive wearing their underpants on the outside and come complete with a cape. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, which we consider when we come to that item. My next speaker I have in person is David Harborne. Again, speaking on item 5, I believe. Thank you.
Good morning. On the 18th of November, the council's executive decided to exclude blue badge holders from pedestrian streets after 10:30 in the morning. The Martin Higgett Associates report mentioned the problems facing some disabled people if they cannot enter the foot streets by car or taxi, and now I will quote, particularly those with limited walking, visually impaired people who need to be able to navigate from a central place, and carers of people with cognitive or emotional difficulties. Many of these people will not be able to use alternative modes of transport or manage the distance from arrival points on the edge of the city centre. Some rely on their car as a safe space for feeding, carrying equipment, or quickly departing." End of quote. The council accepted that if the blue badge ban is made permanent, some disabled people will never be able to access the foot streets during pedestrian hours, which breaches their human rights. Despite that, the executive was told wrongly that there was no other option. They were told that if blue badge holders are allowed to enter the city centre through a staffed barrier, a terrorist might steal or forge a blue badge and use it to carry out an attack. Now, clearly, that risk cannot be entirely ruled out, but it's far more likely that a determined terrorist would see the barriers and think, well, I'll launch my attack outside the foot street area. Many surrounding streets have relatively high footfall, including Station Road, Glenville Bridge, Museum Street, Duncan Place, Gilly Gate, Bridge Street, Ousegate, Foss Gate, Pavement and Stonebow, amongst others. The risk of an attack on these streets is likely to be substantially greater than the risk of a terrorist using a blue badge to enter the foot streets. Other cities, Bath and Chester, for example, have found ways to provide access for blue badge holders and reduce the risk of vehicle as weapon attacks. The Human Rights Act has teeth. A resident recently took Westminster City Council to court over their decision to install anti-terrorism barriers near his house. The court found in the resident's favour. The judge is reported as saying that the bollards caused disproportionate interference with his human right to respect for private and human life. The truth is this: the executive should not have faced an all or nothing decision. Instead, a range of options should have been presented. The executive should have considered allowing blue badge holders to access foot streets via barriers operated by council staff in person or remotely from the city centre CCTV control room. Blue badge holders could have been allowed access to most foot streets or a subset. The executive could have changed the foot street start and finishing times to make life easier for blue badge holders. And the executive should have been told that they could pass two orders: a traffic regulation order setting out baseline rules and an anti-terrorism traffic regulation order allowing the rules to be tightened for specific events such as the Christmas market or when there is a heightened risk of a terrorist attack. It's not too late to reconsider, and to help the executive, the Coalition of Disabled People and DPOs that I'm representing have prepared this paper, which is the one which should have been considered on the 18th of November, and which I will leave with your clerk. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contributions, which we'll consider when we come to that item, but obviously it references decision of the whole executive, not just mine. So, appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. So that concludes the public speakers that I have registered. We don't have any late minute additions. No. Okay. So then with the conclusion of the public speakers, I'm proposing to change the order to take item 5 first, if that is okay with. Was that what you anticipated? Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. Sorry. So Darren. Yeah. Okay. So miscommunication there again. So basically, carry on with the as per the agenda. Sorry, I thought you were asking for it to be changed, but yeah. Okay. Worth to taking through through item 4. Okay. Well, in that case, that's your item, isn't it, Darren? Do you want to do a bit of introduction?
So this item is in relation to the council's annual review of parking restrictions in the city. These representations that have been made from residents or councillors on issues that they've incurred or perceived to be the issue. On the receipt of those representations, the areas have been reviewed, and then recommendations were originally taken to the exec member of transport and then proposed And this is a report on the objections, representations of the
Okay.
proposals that were.
And if we can, as we work through them, we'll take them in the order they're printed. In fact, I think that's probably simplest to make sure we don't miss any. If there are any issues that have come up, been raised by public speakers or written representations, we can look at them when we get to each item, if that's okay. So the first one is Annex A, Acomb Ward. And I noticed this is Danebury Drive, and we had representations particularly on that about there's objections which are referred to in the report. I don't know if you want to say anything about these.
Yeah, so the original proposal was vehicles parking too close to the junction and causing issues to the buses access, obstruction of sight lines. So the proposal was to implement quite a substantial length of Danebury Drive and 15 metres into Rosedale Avenue. The objections were the issues related to the garage, corner parking vehicles. They don't have sufficient room within their site. They should deal with that rather than not the impact onto the residents. And one objection was for the council to widen their drive in exchange for his support. And then the one in support was about the garage. The garage vehicles parking into the garage caused an issue for buses, and feel this would be a benefit to.
Okay. So in your report, there's reference to somebody who was suggesting widening their drop curb, but that wasn't acceptable to the council. Is that because of the location, or what was the reason?
No, they wanted the council to pay.
Oh, I see. Right. So they haven't. So
yeah,
it wasn't a fact
a,
that it couldn't be done.
It's not being assessed. They've currently got a drop curve, so they wanted it wider.
Okay, so that potentially could still be an option if there's an issue. So what you've recommended is not to implement as advertised, but the lesser option, which is on page 23. What's on this one? What I had in mind was the recognising there's one of the representations talks about sight lines and concern at the junction of Rosedale Avenue and Danebury Drive.
Yeah, there was a written representation that came in over the weekend as well about one of the residents on Rosedale Drive asking for restrictions on the opposite side of the road to the north side of the road, as to the extent originally proposed. So the 15 metres into the junction, on the basis that if someone parks opposite their drive, it will cause them issues accessing and exiting.
So that was 15 metres into the north side of Rosedale Avenue, which it was originally proposed.
It was, it was originally.
Yeah. So what I mean, taking account of those representations, what I am minded to approve is, if you like, a halfway house to include an element of junction protection for Rosedale Avenue.
Right, okay.
But obviously not the full extent, not the proposal which was on the west side of Danebury Drive, not to include that.
So the extent that's in the plan that was recommended by officers plus the 15 metres on Rosedale Avenue.
So there's 15 metres into Rosedale Avenue. And I think I did have a quick look at it on Street View. I mean, there is a footway crossing point, which obviously if people park on that corner would be obstructed. So I think I'm a short section of W lines on both sides, but take account of that representation about how far it needs to extend on Rosedale, the north side of Rosedale Avenue. Is that clear enough? So it doesn't need to be the full extent that was originally advertised, but a lesser extent to include protection of both sides of that junction, basically so that the footway is kept clear and for vehicles not parking on the corner. I mean, mindful of the comments that we've had, you know, obviously we've heard Councillor Waters thinks W lines just move the problem, but on the other hand, we've had representations from people who do want something done to protect and to ensure safety, which is the key issue here, I think. So with that amendment, I'm happy to approve that. The next, I think the rest of them were more straightforward for next few. So A2 is Lidget Grove, Beckfield Lane Junction, and there's a lesser restriction proposed here, which is basically protecting the first 10 metres into Lidget Grove, is that right?
Yes, we reduced from 15 to 10 metres.
And obviously that's to minimise the impact on parking, but still protect the visibility for people at that junction. So I'm happy to approve that amended version. Then we've got A3 Plantation Drive. Now this one seems to be a little bit more complicated in that there's obviously quite significant business use in the area, isn't there?
Yeah, so at the Bullfish Road end of the street, there is several businesses, vets, and some food takeaway establishments. Some of the area is used for their parking, which is restricting, so it's short-term parking on a lot of occasions, although the vets can be a bit more expensive.
So I was trying, I couldn't work out where the vets is on this plan, which do you know which premises it is that we're?
It's on Plantation, it fronts onto Plantation Drive itself, is it number 3? So.
What's its own forecourt?
Mr. Gone, it's that one there.
I thought it might be.
Yeah, so there is a private forecourt, which they have said in a representation that businesses from other areas do park in it and obviously their visitors and patients when being able to use the area.
So obviously the double yellow lines would actually benefit in terms of maintaining access. If their private forecourt is obviously their responsibility to police anybody parking there, isn't it? Okay. So the recommendation is to implement the restrictions as you've indicated. Was there any consideration about reducing the extent of the double yellow lines, or is that not really going to help?
There was, but there's not very much assistance that offer. So one of the problems was there was people parking on footpaths as well, which is blocking the access into these private courtyards as well. So
okay, so obviously the W lines would enable us to enforce pavement parking on that stretch as well. Yeah. Okay, well I'm happy with the recommendation on that one. Thank you. So then we have the one Copmanthorpe Lane, Atherton Road. Is there anything to say about this one? Of you recommending as advertised?
Yeah, as advertised. The one objection was that it's not required due to there's obviously white bar marking in front of the entrance to the Methodist Church, and on the opposite side it's only one vehicle, but that vehicle, any vehicles parking in that area is forcing vehicles to travel on the opposite side of the road to approach the junction, which is the reason for the proposal.
So well, on that basis, I'm happy to approve it as recommended. So we're going to have B2, which is on Copmanthorpe Lane. Options here, overall objections or uphold objections and take no further action recommended. Do you want to say something about this one?
So the objections were lack of offered parking for the properties, access required close to property due to residents having mobility issues, and some of the age of the residents, which do require overnight warden service and access. Recent incident of vehicles every 3 hours whilst providing support to the resident. And multiple trips to and from the car were required with heavy equipment. One of the issues seems to be teachers and nursery staff from the local school parking on the street all day, restricting the availability. And then there's a vehicle off New End that operates a business delivery hub. So there's lots of large delivery vehicles that come in delivered throughout the day. the implementation of WL lines will not stop them to do that. They'll still be able to load and unload from the area. And as I said, the other issue was it will just knock the parking onto another section of Bishop Park and cause an issue in another area.
So basically, what you're recommending is to uphold the objections and actually take no further action. Obviously, if we follow that course of action, then there's nothing to stop an alternative solution coming forward. But so what you're saying is that in the light of objections, this isn't the right one.
Yeah, and one of the issues with the school, apparently they have recently implemented a park and stride scheme from the social club,
right?
And it was asking for further acknowledgement and advertisement of that scheme, which so something our travel team can take up with the school.
Okay, I'm happy to approve that recommendation then, which is no further action on that. And then B3 is Acaster Lane and Main Street Junction. Again, some fairly lengthy objections, and you're suggesting a lesser restriction than was advertised.
Yeah, so bring it back to more of a junction protection in the area. Some of the concerns were vehicle speeds coming down the junction and not having good visibility of vehicles parked on the stretch. Areas required for care workers will affect local businesses due to a limited availability of parking in the Bishop area anyway. And people in support will improve bus service, and cars are parking too close to the junction. This is causing an issue with visibility entering and exiting the street.
Okay, and there is a bus clearway. Is that not going to be implemented now, the bus clearway?
It was originally marked, and the bus travel team said that they'll monitor the situation. If it does feel it's needed in future, they will take that forward in their own.
Okay, so they can do that independently of this process.
Because there was one resident that had concern about it overhanging her drive, so that will be taken into consideration at that point if it wasn't taken forward.
Okay, so recommendation is to implement the lesser restrictions. I'm happy with that, which is on page 40. B4, courtyard. This one again is like a corner protection. What's the you're suggesting the objections need to be?
So all the issues, all representations of objection, we've said to take no further action. The objections are on the basis of it's not required and just an opportunity to increase revenue for the council. It will affect the village appearance and access to local businesses, reduce the level of parking on Main Street and the courtyard. And the areas required for guest parking to the pockets of the courtyard, they all have room for one vehicle, which have a knock-on effect to other areas of the village.
Okay, I'm happy to support that recommendation. No further action then. So that's B5, Cannons Court. This one recommended to implement, is that right?
Yeah, the objections will force vehicles parked near private drive access, will potentially affect visibility of their access. The areas required for care workers to park, to visit the properties, and work to solve the problem, just move it on. And then there was representation support saying that vehicles are currently parking too close to the junction and affecting visibility in and out of the courtyard. And then Scott, sorry, from Acaster Lane.
Right. Well, I'm happy to follow your recommendations there and implement that as advertised. I don't see any more councillor comments, so follow your recommendations. So we move on to C1, which is Clifton Ward. Implement as advertised. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Then D1, string houses and woodthorpe. One objection.
Just felt the restrictions didn't go further enough. So into the access road to the hospice, they wanted both sides of the road. Feel
Oh, I
that
see. So,
that
yeah,
bit.
so the only objection was that it wasn't enough.
Yeah,
But so we can implement that, and obviously if it's still a problem.
yeah, review in our next.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Two is shelf fonts. We'll have some more councillor comments as well. If they're in support.
Yeah. So yeah, the only issue is on the shelf ones that it didn't go further enough at the area where the garage parking is. The way services vehicles making that manoeuvre at the moment with the vehicles parked in the area are having to overrun the footpath. Well, it's the verge and the curbs that's causing the damage.
Right, and it may well be that they're trying to avoid parked cars on the other side of the road.
Yeah, so we've recommended to implement that as advertised and then continue to review how the way services vehicles operate in future.
I'm happy with that. Okay. So then next one is E1, moving to Fishergate Ward. This is opposite.
Oh, there was A3. Sorry.
Oh, I missed one somewhere. Oh, sorry. A3. And that one is implemented as advertised as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Oh, okay. So
thank you. Okay, right. E1 says Broadway. I'm aware that there are issues here about vehicles trying to turn right out of that service road. So this is the proposal is to reduce the extent from what was advertised.
Yeah, the
is that
initial
in response to some of the objections?
Well, the initial complaint was to do with, as you say, vehicles exiting the service yard for the shops. On inspection of the street, we noticed that visibility was affected into Wesley Avenue due to vehicles parked. And then, I say, one of the representation was that it wasn't required at such a long length and should be brought back. The road is wide enough to still facilitate two-way travel. So we're recommending to implement, and then obviously as previous, keep it on under review to any further implementation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, as with all of these things, that if it's too extensive, then just encourages more speeding. So the only question I have is, I think at the moment some of the properties have got white bar markings, and if this becomes double yellow lines, can we make sure that the first sort of couple of driveways beyond the extent of the double yellow lines have white bar, because it just moves the problem down.
So implement white bar markings.
White bar markings.
63,
yeah, like particularly. I mean, I don't know who lives at 63, but you look from the map, it would seem.
We can offer it to residents, but it's usually got things of resident requests. So we could write to them, ask them if they would like it as part of it.
Okay, if we can sort of include that as an option, if they're concerned about it displacing parking across their drive, that's what I'm thinking about. Because obviously there's quite regularly people stopping for short periods to go into the shops. Yeah. There, okay. So with that amendment, I'm happy to agree the reduced extent as you've got, which is be up to across 61, won't it? Basically, extend from 49 to 61. So then the next one does need perhaps a little bit more discussion is E2, which is the guest house bays on section of Fulford Road near Howard Street. And just to perhaps should just say that one of the concerns that was raised in representation suggested that it was related to the conversion into flats of a building at the back of Howard Street, and said that the owner is in with the council. Well, that's not my impression, because there seem to be repeat planning applications. He eventually managed to get approval. So,
is that down the side of number 4? Yeah. It hasn't. That has no representation within that. They've been excluded from the res pack zone.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay. So they're not eligible for permits in the area anyhow. So do you want to explain the thinking behind this a bit?
It was proposal to change all the bays to community bays. There's currently guest house bays and household bays. It will increase the availability for businesses and guest house in the area. There's been a recent increase in holiday lets in the area. The bays on Cemetery Road have previously been amended to community bays.
Right, so the ones on Grange Garth, is that?
On Community Road, Cemetery Road, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Cemetery Road, right.
So the objections are that we move the dedicated bays for the guest houses, but it will give them a larger area to offer their guests. Obviously.
So then, the two that are on, it's actually Grange Garth, it's not labelled on the plan, but the road's just opposite.
Yeah,
there's some couple of bays there would then be available to their guests if they.
No, they're not in the proposal. They'll stay as household. It's on Cemetery Road. The ones on Cemetery Road were last year made community bays.
Right.
Obviously, the idea is to make all zones more community. So it's
so sorry. Just it's an important point. Just to get clear, the community bay is different from a household bay.
Yeah, community bay is open to all permit holders. So anyone is eligible to park in that bay if they have a valid permit.
Right. So that would be guest house or a normal householder.
Yeah. So it opens up the area and availability of parking, but the tech removes, as the objection is raised, guaranteed bays just for their use.
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of, so the proposal is that they become community bays.
Yeah.
But in terms of the alternative places that their guests have got, do you know how many bays there are on Cemetery Road?
Not off the top of my head, no. It's.
I mean, what extent is it?
It is a long bay. It goes, say, from the Wem. As you can see on the plan, it goes from near its junction with Fulford Road up, and it goes almost to the next junction.
Right.
And there's an access fee from Howard Street, that's an access fee.
There is a pedestrian access, I know, at the end of Howard Street onto Cemetery Road. So they would have access to that as well as these ones here. And have you got any figures in terms of has there been any monitoring about how busy they are, how well used they are? Because I'm aware on Cemetery Road, the ones in front of people's houses, which you can see on this plan, are obviously quite well used, but then there's some further around the corner that are not.
Yeah, further north towards the park, which is near the entrance.
Yeah.
That's west. It's more free use in that area.
And those
obviously will create an inconvenience to the guest house guests because they'll have further to walk than they do currently.
Right. Okay. So I'm a little bit nervous about, because I'd understood that you were meaning that they could park anywhere in R20.
I do. I'm not 100%. I think the Grange, as you say, are community, but I'm not 100%. So I don't want to commit to that.
Right. So if the Grange Garth is not included,
it is an entry sign, so it should be. Yeah, it will be because they're entry bays. So Grange Garth.
I think they are designated bays. Those.
So yeah, so it's south of that, to the west of that. So as you enter in Grange Garth past those, they are community bays because they're entry. These two are just dedicated bays on street because there was an issue with the site position of the amendment signage.
I mean, I suppose what I'm minded to say is if I can make a delegated decision that provided those two bays on Grange Garth, because I think from a point of view of convenience of their guests, you know, those are more naturally places that they might look to park than somewhere, you know, on the next street.
So implement as advertised and then
implement as advertised,
if not already, make them community
but make,
based as well.
yeah, if those are also community based, but not, I mean, if they're not, then obviously delay the decision until that is completed. Is that
okay?
Okay. I'm aware, obviously, it is in my ward. I don't have any direct financial interest, but I do want to make sure we try and get it right for everyone. As with all of them, of course. But, okay, so that is approved, subject to checking that those 2 bays on Grange Garth are community bays, and if they are not, then deferring the decision until we can arrange that change to be made. So then moving on to D1, which is in Guildhall Ward. This is St Mary's and Frederick Street.
So it's the same, similar.
This is a similar sort of thing, isn't it?
It's changing GM bays to community. On initial communication with parking services, there was no guest house permits issued at that point. Since that time, further have now been issued, and the recommendation is to complete a further review and look at making the whole zone a community.
Okay, I'm happy to. I'm conscious, obviously, there's some work going on St Mary's at the other end of the loop, which involves losing one of the parking spaces.
Yeah, three spaces has already been moved as part of the signal works at the junction.
Yeah, so I'm happy to support your recommendation, which is to actually defer this decision for further review rather than make the change.
Okay.
Yeah. Next one, G1 Haxby and Wigginton Ward. So this is proposing a lesser restriction than advertised.
It's take no further action on G1 South Lane. The property, I'm not sure the number, opposite Tiger Lane, or it does have a white bar marking. So we do have elderly residents in the area that do use the parking. It will have a knock-on effect and push the parking into other side streets, which is like we know about.
So the lesser restriction you're proposing is to what? To omit the section on South Lane?
No, it's to take no further action on it.
Oh, no further action.
So to nothing on South Lane or the extra 3 meters on Old Orchard either.
Okay. Well, seeing there's been a significant number of objections on that.
It was brought forward a number of years ago and similar situation occurred.
I'm happy to leave it as it is, as you say. Then G2, Greenshaw Drive, implement as advertised. I'm happy with that. Then next one is G3, Westfield Lane. And I think this one we've discussed before, haven't we?
I think something in the area has been brought forward for previously, yes.
Yeah, I seem to recall this one. What I'm minded to do on this one, seeing as it's been raised previously, obviously there's still the same objections, I think, about the extent to which it just moves the problem. But I think there is probably quite a strong argument for implementing lesser restriction than advertised at the junction of Plantation Way and Green Dyke.
Yeah, I believe it changes to Westfield Lane at the pump house.
Can you just remind me, were there any particular representations about problems at that junction?
There was issues of people parking too close to the junction of Plantation Way, was it, sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think there was a concern about people parking too close.
Well, I think I can see that, you know, if this moves the problem further away, that may obviously not solve the problem, but I think implementing a lesser restriction just to protect the mouth of Plantation Way to whatever, what does that say, 8 meters?
Yeah, that was what.
I mean, if it was 8 meters in each direction on the 2 sides of Plantation Way, just
So just the 8 meters on Plantation Way,
just to protect that junction mouth and see if that actually addresses the problem. Because I'm conscious if we've had it, you know, proposed a year ago and then we've just done nothing and the same issues coming up, you know, we need to be seen to doing something without.
I think it was quite a few years ago when the further restrictions up near the school were put in.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so I'm happy to implement a lesser restriction just for Plantation Way Junction, and then obviously if there's still an issue, I'm sure it will come back to us in future. G4, Village Garth and Village Junction. This one is recommended to implement as advertised. I mean, one of the objections is that it's not enough, isn't it?
Yeah, there was one that said, was asking to remove, the rest were saying we haven't gone further enough with this proposal.
I can't recall seeing any particular argument saying that this will make matters worse. That's usually the issue. I mean, obviously this is again junction protection, isn't it?
Yeah.
To improve sight lines and safety turning in and out of the junction. So I'm happy with your recommendation to implement. H1, Heworth Ward, Glen Road and Harthorpe Street. So this is actually changing the res park bays, isn't it? Do you want to just explain it a little bit?
So it's changing the res park bay on Glen Road to make it 24-hour with 10-minute no return, and then introducing 2 new bays on Harcourt Street with the same time restrictions.
Right. And there was one representation about an issue of somebody turning in or out of
the alleyway that's accessed off Harcourt Street.
Is that the back alleyway off Beaufort that's along to the east?
Yeah. So there's a resident down there that has a garage and has concern about parking their vehicle and entering their vehicle due to the tightness of the.
From where the parking bays are, I can't see that would particularly add to the problem. We've got double yellow lines on the other side of the road. So, I don't really see that as being a reason for not implementing it. So I'm happy to approve as advertised. H2, Monkton Road, Elmfield Avenue. Pedestrian crossing points on Monk Road and Elmfield Avenue. So this is again to protect the pedestrian crossing points as well, isn't it? Which are, as you can see, the gaps in the grass verge on the plan. I'm happy to approve that as advertised.
This is 7th Avenue, which
this is the one which
spoke about and provided the pictures.
Spoke about, isn't it? So this is the access road that's marked on there. Is where you were saying the delivery vehicles coming in and out of, presumably to the back of that premises that fronts onto the roundabout.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one is the premises that's the shop. I think it's the one in the middle.
Mhm.
So if you can confirm it, I believe that. Sounds right. Yeah. It's further around, and the shops off the parking area on 4th Avenue.
Mhm. Okay. So the particular point that the speaker made was in the extension of the limit, the limits on 7th Avenue. Was that the concern?
Yes, the representation made in the meeting was that the restrictions won't offer adequate support. The vehicles being used by the shop are still too large, and the damage that has occurred from the bollards in the area will still happen and potentially cause issues for pedestrians due to the overrun.
Okay. I mean, in the light of your the representations, do you have any particular changes to suggest to your recommendation?
No, as I say, the representations, although we do understand the difficulty, we can't put a restriction on the size of the vehicle through this review. This is there to help try and facilitate, and we can continue to monitor and look at additional infrastructure in the area, which may include bollards, discussions with the shop outside the deliveries, and look at potential loading bays on 4th Avenue for them.
I mean, again, this is potentially an issue that all councillors could raise if that was going to be helpful in the area. I can't see any comments from all councillors on this particularly.
No.
So, I mean, it does seem to me that the restrictions that are proposed will actually help keep sort of access onto the sort of area between 7th Avenue and 4th Avenue, and potentially help a little bit with turning on that corner, preventing people from parking right close up to it. So, and bearing in mind what you've said and the comments that have been made, I'm happy to approve the recommended restrictions, but with, you know, as you say, the added note that there may be other issues about size of vehicles and so on, which are outside the scope of our restrictions. That's something that the ward councillors could take up with highway officers and, you know, try and clarify whether any sort of restrictions are appropriate. I mean, I appreciate that it applies across the whole of the city, that, you know, sometimes there are larger vehicles than appropriate making drops in quite constrained areas, but the only sanction that we have is either weight limits or trying to work with the retailers.
The weight limit wouldn't work because there'd still be access in the area.
Well, obviously, if they're accessing, then it's a weight limit except for access, isn't it? That's usually the case. Okay. So, you know, I'm happy to, outside of the meeting, take it up with all councillors if that's useful, but otherwise we'll approve as recommended. So I'll move on now to item I. Without ward. So this is this is one where there's a problem about parking close to the corner, isn't there?
Yeah, so there's an access onto a field which is used for dog walking. So and different dog walking companies that's parking large vehicles in the area, which is causing an issue with visibility of the junction.
Right. I mean, the main objections seem to be about moving the problem further afield, but presumably to move it further down Elmfield Terrace, for instance. Well, this is all Elmfield Terrace, isn't it? But move it in either direction, it will be moving it away from the corner.
Yeah, and including improving safety of.
Yeah, including
the
safe
tight
pedestrian access to and from that footpath, presumably. I'm happy to approve that. J1, Springfield Avenue, Beach Avenue.
Which is what Councillor Callum Taylor spoke about, the issue on that area.
Right, thank you. This is the one where the proposal is to revoke some parking bays to sort of deal with the issue of it. I gather this is this sort of the boundary between a res park area and a not a res park area?
Park Lane and Falconer Street are residents parking, as well as the bays on Springfield Avenue. There's properties that front on Springfield Avenue that over time have been, well, onto Beach Avenue, which have had amendments to the properties, I think, and now they have access onto there. So those properties aren't allowed access to the res park bay, they're not within the zone. So the proposal is to remove these bays from residents parking. They're underutilised. I say some of the representation said about residents of Falconer Street and Park Lane that don't want to pay for permits that are parking on Beach Avenue.
Right.
So I'd say it'll increase availability for non-permit holders in the area.
So in terms of the main, obviously the main concern would be if there wasn't sufficient street length for permit holders in the bay, but your judgment is that there is.
Yeah, the bays on Falconer Street and Park Lane, they're on inspection there does seem to be availability in the area.
Right. I mean, this is again sort of in a way the counter argument to extending residence parking, but I'm happy to give it a try and see if it solves the problem. You know, if this is what the ward council and the residents in the area seem to think may be a solution, I'm happy to approve that. So the next one I've got is J2. Right, now this is on Severus Avenue, York Road Junction.
Yes.
I'm just trying to check whether any representations from the councillors.
Not written, and it's not one that Councillor Taylor spoke about when he made comments.
Well, there seem to be, there's a few points I've highlighted in here. There's some of the objections seem to think it was prioritising vehicle movements, which I don't quite follow. And it says the reason given for this proposal, it will improve the sight lines. However, this is not the case. I don't know if you can comment on that.
So the proposal was to improve sight lines for vehicles exiting Seventh Avenue that couldn't see vehicles coming from the east on York Road. There was a suggestion that due to the zebra crossing and location of that you do have good visibility and it's limited parking in that area. So the officer recommendation is to take no further action.
Well, I'm somewhat. It's not obviously I don't live in the area, but I have concerns that we've got. Looking at this plan, we have got a section W lines which is junction protection, and then a short section which is allowing parking opposite a bus stop clearway. So potentially you've got road narrowing down.
Is a wide section of road with buses parked there and cars. Often two-way travel does continue.
Right.
I live on Manor Drive North, so I know visit the area.
So you say it's so is it wide enough for vehicles, HGVs, to pass the bus and parking opposite?
HGVs may have difficulty to pass the bus, but two-way cars, it doesn't restrict any vehicle movements in the area.
Right. Okay. So the recommendation is to
take no further action.
Take no further action. Okay. Well, I'll agree with the no further action, but I do think it will need to be monitored. It may be that we will end up revisiting it, in terms of the wider issues around on York Road. But I approve the officer.
The original request came from ward resident, ward councillor, and obviously it wasn't anything that was mentioned in the representation was received. So
right. So the original request came from ward councillor, but we haven't responded.
There was an historic issue on 7th Avenue of people using it in contravention of the access restriction. So we've been working with the police on that. Whether
right. I'll take your advice and no further action at this point in time, but I do think we're likely to come back to it again at some point in the future. So then the next one we've got is
J3.
So the next one is J3, which is recommending a reduced length be implemented next to the bus stop clearway. Is that right?
Yeah.
So this is concerned with an impact on the business was raised. I'm happy to approve your lesser restrictions. Okay. Hull Road Ward at K1. Implementers advertised. Yes, I'm happy with that. K2.
Which is what Andrew Martin spoke about.
Right, so this is the one which this is the one where we're saying it in objection because it relates to the petition.
Yeah, so his objection was in isolation. This will not help the issue of parking in the area.
I'm happy to defer this then, in the light of the representation. I'm happy to defer this to be considered following the consideration of the petition.
Right, okay. Do you want this item bringing back at the April meeting with, or will you just make a decision?
Well, basically, I suppose I'm deciding to take no further action, but to revisit that once we've considered the petition. So it could be on the agenda for the April meeting if that seemed to be the best way of dealing with it.
Well, the item's already written, so it would just be resubmission of it.
So just be resubmission. I'm just don't want to be accused of preempting the petition.
So it was on Warwick parking issue.
So, yeah. So well, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, obviously, this is a solution we've put forward in response to a petition. So if the representation want to tell us something different, then we can consider it at the same time, and they can make representations whether or not they want this, basically. Yeah.
You suggested was possible.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So that one's deferred to April. Yeah. So then that's obviously in the light of the representations received. L1 Huntington Ward.
Yeah, apologies for this. It's been wrongly marked. It's actually in the Heworth ward. It's it's been missed.
Okay.
We did receive a written representation from the councillors that was circulated prior to the meeting.
And so the councillors, well, it says the ward council reports receiving several complaints about this and refuse were obstructing from collection. So the representations we've had since then have also been in support of it.
I haven't got a copy of the councillors in front of me, I can't remember. They were, I think some of the residents were asking for restrictions to be considered on the opposite side of the road, rather than so at the riverside. You got the email that I sent through yesterday.
So I seem to remember reading in this that there was some of the objections were suggesting the restriction should be on the other side of the road.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Ward Council is asking us to consider implementing it on the opposite side of the road is the same as the residents.
The Ward Council are suggesting it should be off the side of the road as well, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they've asked us to consider that rather than what's proposed here.
On that basis, I suppose we need to defer it, or because obviously if we approve this, then it's not, and it hasn't. The opposite side of the road hasn't been advertised, has it?
So take no further action. And
no further action and consult with the councillor. Yeah. Sorry, I'm making more work for you. But obviously, if we implement it on this side of the road, and the view is that it should be on the other, then that won't help matters. And then we're on to Annex M, and these are the ones that were representations from Councillor Kilbane.
Yeah.
There's M1 and M2. Now the first one, as I understand it, is relating to an issue about regular coach parking.
No, that's M2.
That's M2, okay.
So M1.
M1
was the removal of the residence parking bay outside numbers 50 to 53 Numford Road. And changing the single yellow line next to that to double yellow lines to make it safe at the junction. So it's a bit tight vehicles. The representation that Councillor Kilbane made was to extend, was asking to look at extending the bay south-east and retaining a small section, which is what we've proposed to implement. So we would look at extending that bay as well.
I'm slightly confused because my notes from Councillor Kilbane was suggesting we do nothing on this.
Well, it is if we, I think that would be his preference, but if it is to implement, he wants us to look at a review to extend the bay southwest side. Yeah.
I mean, on the basis of the representations, I'm happy to take no further action subject to further conversation, because I don't want to put in place something that they don't think is a solution.
Okay.
And then M2, again on this one, he seemed to be opposed to the change. This is the one with the reference to the coaches and speeding.
Yeah, so the coaches to the guest house are arriving at all hours of the day on tour groups, so they'll visit a different city, then travel on to York and arrive in the evening, some days, or in the morning. Currently parking sort of to the northwest of the bay, which is seen as too close to the junction and traffic signals, which is impeding movement in the area. So the proposal was originally to remove the whole bay. We've reduced that now to remove the recommendation to remove 9 meters of the bay to 10 meters. And then, so that will give extra room for coaches to park on the double-yellows and unload and then exit the area away from the signalised junction.
So is there no reason why, I mean, there's a section of double yellows before that bay. Is there no reason why they can't unload there?
That's an access into apartments and flats. Kirk House, as a few of the objections are concerned that it will have an impact on their visibility. It's the purchase party first to their access.
Right. So your proposal is to a lesser restriction,
Yeah.
which is still leaving some parking, but
Yeah. And,
allowing for the coaches to offload more or less directly in front of the hotel.
and there was a representation from some of the residents of the junctions at Skycroft Hill to look at, if this was implemented, to look at the amending the times of their res park, because they feel it will have, because these are currently unrestricted parking at the moment, and Skycroft Hill is Monday to Friday 9 till 5, so they're concerned that it will move residents from this area into their street.
Right.
So they want,
So, I mean,
which is what
that's-
Councillor Carshaw has asked for as well.
So, I mean, does that need a decision today to actually review the? I mean, I'm happy to approve that, but obviously that's.
We
that
could add
would
it
be-
to our list for review.
Just add it to your
yeah.
list of schemes. I'm happy for you to add that as one of the consequences, if you like, from this, but it won't be enacted at this point. It will be added to the list. Okay. So, I mean, I think I do take your point, and that this is going some way to addressing the concerns that have been raised about parking, well, unloading close to the junction with the main road. So I'm happy to approve the amended restriction that you've identified. And obviously that can then be reviewed if it's not achieving the objective, and maybe a different solution is needed. Do we have sort of, when we get complaints about coaches and things like that, I mean, obviously they're allowed to wait while they're actually loading and unloading, but that shouldn't be more than 10 minutes, should it?
You'd hope
10
not,
to 15 minutes
but
at most.
the civil enforcement officers won't ticket a vehicle if there's genuine movement to and from the vehicle.
Right.
Obviously.
Yes. No, I'm just
yeah.
concerned that they might be, arriving an hour before they're due to.
Yeah,
collect
the
party and
representation saying the
that sort of
coaches can
thing.
take up 60 minutes to unload all the bags, which seems.
That seems rather excessive, but yeah, okay. So I'm happy to agree that as amended, but acknowledge it may not be the full solution. But there is obviously further work that more councillors concerned to follow up with that. In particular for reviewing the hours of R48, I think it was. The next one is Annex N, Rawcliffe and Clifton without, Landlewood Road. Did we have any?
There was two representations.
Because the representation was in support of this, David Burke, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was David Burke who was talking in support, saying that these current issues, and then there was Heather Ward who was in objections to the proposal.
Yeah, she was speaking about drive and
yes,
I don't know quite where the drive is that we were referring to on this.
I'm not sure which property she was exactly, but she was saying she currently has off road park one vehicle but has two. They've made an application previously to extend their drive to facilitate parking for two and has had that declined.
I mean, is there any lesser restriction that might accommodate that objection?
Well, one of the issues was that vehicles were parked on the footpath to make sure that sufficient width was available.
I see.
And that was causing an issue, as David Burke mentioned about people accessing the park and other facilities in the area having to walk in the carriageway with young children.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think on balance, we do need to implement these, as you say, particularly if it's an issue about pedestrian safety and people blocking footways in order to allow vehicles to come through. Except that this obviously may move the problem from one side of the road to another, but it hopefully would at least remove some of the pavement parking process. So I'm happy to approve, implement as advertised. N2, this one is about, again, protecting a junction and safety near a school. Nursery, isn't it? I mean, inevitably, with nurseries, you will get sort of drop-off traffic as an issue in the surrounding area, but the main thing is to protect the safe access in and out. You know, the point where those who are walking and cycling as well can safely access the nursery.
Our recommendation is to reduce.
So your recommendation is to reduce the restriction, but still have that. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Oh, rural west, we're getting there.
So this is Millfield Lane near Manor School.
Oh, right, yes. Now this one is an interesting one. So do you want to explain the thinking behind what's proposed?
So we've had consent issues raised about child safety due to large vehicles entering what is the business park past the school. We proposed restrictions on the west side to keep that clear. Some of the representations have said that we've proposed on the wrong side and should be on the other side, leaving that area available for parking. Currently, you're getting double parking, vehicles parking on the grass verge outside the businesses. A lot of businesses don't have enough parking. Our concern is if the vehicles are parked on the opposite side to the junction access, it'll reduce them turning circles of vehicles, large HGV vehicles entering those sites. Although there was one representation of a vehicle on the east side that was damaged from a HGV exiting, but we've got no information on how that accident happened. Or
actually, I think on your papers there's a correction to make. Where on page 125 it says eastern side, and I assume you mean western side. Recommendation advertised.
Yes.
That should be western.
Yeah, it should be western. Yeah.
So we've had one representation in support from Parish Council. For objections. I mean, I suppose the question that's going through my mind on this is that if this results in lots of parking along the grass verge and blocking access into the...
That's currently happening, is what they're saying.
What, so there's currently parking on both sides?
Yeah, and so there's insufficient parking within the site for staff vehicles.
Right.
And that...
I mean, I suppose the advantage to the west side is it does protect the footway. I think, is that a shared footway and cycleway, if I remember rightly?
That section, yes, I believe.
Yes. So that in terms of access to and from the school. But I think in terms of the timescales, I must admit, if we're starting from scratch, I would have sort of had an advert for restrictions on both sides. But since this has been advertised and consulted on, I think the solution is that we have to implement this and then monitor with a view to any further restrictions on the east side, because unfortunately, you know, if we don't implement this, then it's going to probably be another year before anything happens to address the problem. Circumstances, I'm going to agree to what you're suggesting, implement as advertised, but acknowledge that, you know, it may or may not be the right solution, but because it wasn't advertised for the other side, we can't then say, I can't at this point in time say, oh no, don't implement that, to implement the other side of the road. The only option is to implement what you've got here, isn't it? Yeah, okay, thank you. So then we've got P1 Glebe Close. Spencer Ward. So objections, was there any consideration here about reduced length? So you're actually recommending no further action, aren't you?
Yeah, on the site visit to the area, it wasn't deemed that there was any obstructive parking, which was causing an issue for access, egress to the street. The complaint came from access from a private residence. So wanted the parking on the opposite side of the street to be removed, so then they could manoeuvre in and out of their property.
Okay, so this might be something where a white bar or something might just address the issue.
The white bar would only be across the front of the drive, so it wouldn't affect anyone parking on the opposite side.
Right. But it may be, sounds like it's more of a neighbour type situation rather than caused by attractions to, you know, other things in the area, businesses or whatever. Is that your reading of it, basically? It's just
the resident in objection, it would leave him with nowhere to park his additional car.
Right.
Okay. They need 2 cars for the different jobs that they do.
So the judgment of Solomon will basically take no further action. Okay, thank you. So that moves me on to Q1 Westfield Ward,
which is one of the representations.
Which was one of the comments we had about in support was Mr. Sidor. This was talking about problems about pavement parking and so on and access into that area. We've got strong support in favour, some objections. I mean, main objections seem to be about whether it moves the problem elsewhere, but it does seem we've got junction protection and keeping one side of the road clear, which should address the pavement parking. So I'm happy to approve implementing as advertised. Q2, Ascombe Lane and Grange Lane. Is this another one which we had some comments on?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. All right, this is alongside the grassed. We've got grassed area is adopted highway.
Vehicles are currently parking on that area,
right?
And due to the not having restrictions on that, it's
so this gives you the opportunity to ticket anybody who's on the footpath or
on that grass area in the middle.
I'm happy to approve that as advertised. I know that when there are green spaces, quite often they do end up getting turned up with people using them as parking. So if it's adopted highway, then that gives us the opportunity to address that problem. Okay, and then Q3,
which is a representation in the room from Jeffrey Norton, who's against the proposal.
This is again on Gale Lane. Was this the? This is the issue.
So this is outside the shop, yes.
By the shop. Was this the gentleman who said it was proposed to have 15 minutes outside the shop?
Yeah, it's actually 20 minutes, but yeah, it's just to the south. There is an area there that's available as well, which is currently which will remain unrestricted. So there's an access into the property next to it, and then there's an area of land that is used for parking. I think the representation did say they've made an application for a drop curb, but that's waiting assessment from on a finance point.
Right. I think given the representation.
After speaking, he did also hand out some images of, sorry, which I don't know if you've
All right.
got a chance to see.
Okay.
It's different to showing us it.
Right. So this is the gentleman, this is your frontage, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And you have. Right. And I know this is a little bit out of normal practice, but just going to clarify, have you applied for a drop curb? Or are you in the process of looking at that?
But then nobody ever gets back to me.
Right.
Then I talked to my housing officer and said there's some grants available. But nobody's put me like neighbourhood grants or like everybody else on Gale Lane has got drop curbs. But none of the neighbours haven't.
No. And I think what I'm trying to do is to take no further action at this point, but ask for this to be looked at. I can see there's an issue, you know, in terms of deliveries and so on, and people parking there. Yeah. But I do think we need to have a conversation with housing department just to clarify what the situation is.
Here's requirements, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then the carers from next door could park on.
I think I'll decide on this one. No further action at this point in time, to have further conversations to see whether we can resolve issue about having somewhere for you to park off the road. And then if that's sorted, then we can obviously revisit the issue.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Right. I'm sorry you've had to wait for so long. Okay. So that was the last but one. So the last one.
We'll try and make discussions with our housing services team and see if someone can discuss, get in touch with you about your available options.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then R1 is in Weldrake Ward. It's proposing to Dalton Hill Main Street. No waiting at any time in and around these two junctions. The recommendations to implement as recommended. I'm happy to approve that. So that concludes that item. I don't know if anyone does want a couple of minutes break. So I think that would be.
Unless you need to James.
Is that? Can we take a brief break? Yeah, I just think that might be good. Okay, so we'll resume shortly. Welcome back. I'm moving on to agenda item 5, which is update on actions agreed by executive for city centre accessibility. And this is going to be one of regular sort of reports on progress on the measures that were agreed at the executive on the 18th of November. So I've got Dave Atkinson is going to introduce this item.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gordon. So just for clarity in terms of the report, this is a report updating on the actions from the executive meeting in November. So there were some areas that the public speakers explored that were obviously decisions that were made in the past. So they would need. It's obviously this is a comment about the progress on the plan rather than revisiting previous decisions.
So in fact, I'm not making. Well, I think there's one decision on budgets, but apart from
that's the decision. I think in terms of the public speakers and the public representations, I think there's probably an overarching one that I just want to acknowledge from our perspective, which is around engagements with groups. I'm not going to identify any individual groups specifically, but we had some feedback that we'd mentioned some of the groups in reports, and we needed to refer to them before we did that. I think it's just a bit of a misunderstanding on our side, which we'll clarify. But I just wanted to make it clear to members of the public that we're committing to engaging with groups where we can, and this will improve when we have the access officer in post, and we'll be able to structure that a little bit better. At the moment, we're progressing the work, some of which was assigned to the access officer in the access officer's absence, but we're now through the development of that role, and it should be out to advert imminently.
Yes, and so in that particular point, I think it's referenced in paragraph 7 in the report, the creation of an access officer post, which is actually was one of the recommendations from the Higgett report and previous report, actually, that was a key role that we should have in place to help us to develop a consistent access standard for York that takes into account the historic constraints and the security needs that we are grappling with. And the job description has been developed in close consultation with disability rights groups, as referred to in the report. So we are, as you said, now close to the point of advertising that post to be able to have that person in post to fulfill the role, which was identified as one of the actions from November, which is what this report is focused on.
There was a comment by one of the public speakers about, I can't remember if it was in the representations or in the written representation or the spoken representations about the assessments of mobility aids and using a cycle as a mobility aid. I think it might have been in the York Cycle campaign's representations, and that will be something that will be considered by the access officer. But as an overarching thing, again, just to reiterate, we are still progressing with the work in the access officer's absence while we can. In terms of, I'm just trying to pick up other points. So we've got some particular representations around our implementation of drop curbs and drop crossings. I just wanted to respond in terms of these comments in order. In terms of the actual implementation of the drop crossings, we will seek to put the safest measures in place we possibly can for people who are blind and partially sighted. And I think the implementation or the installation of tactiles isn't always possible. But what we're doing on a site-by-site assessment is making sure we've got the best possible measures in place. And I think that kind of jumps onto the second one. It's kind of reassurance that blind and partially sighted people have a clear, safe, navigable routes through the city centre. Again, we'll work towards that as we review street by street the drop crossing, drop curb raised crossing. It's all in the annex of the report as we go through those considerations. I think probably if we move from that onto your decision. Oh yeah, in terms of, there's a request that we add these to the recommendations, but what I'm going to suggest is we include these comments in our action plan, and then we just make sure that we refer back to these when we do the future meetings.
So what you're referring to in particular, we've had a written representation, which was
from Diane Rower from your site,
which
site
is
council,
specifically relating to.
And there is a final point on that Diane has offered some time to speak to us about that. We would absolutely welcome that engagement.
Right. Yeah. So there are some specific questions, and I think that this does illustrate the benefit of these reports, because very much welcome the contribution that Diane's made, and hopefully that will help us to make sure that the measures that we're putting in place do take account of specific needs of blind and partially sighted. I'm aware that some of the comments relate to both things like blue badge parking bays, whether or not we have them as shared with delivery vehicles, and the question of tactiles, where we're implementing dropped curbs. So I think, just on that particular point, obviously we may need to take that away and look at it, but I'm aware that one of the aspects that we are developing, it's referred to in the report, is that there's already, we're incorporating drop crossings in whenever feasible, as paragraph 22. Refers to Colligate, Stonegate and Church Street, which is a footway maintenance scheme. So where we're doing footway repairs or maintenance in the city centre, as is referred to in this report, we are looking for opportunities to include the drop crossings. But as is indicated in the annex to this report, there are different approaches that might be used depending on the circumstances and the location.
And welcome feedback as we walk through those. The decision related to these issues in terms of drop curbs and drop crossing is to the so when we wrote the paper, the active travel bid to the Department for Transport was still outstanding. We got an announcement of that on Friday, and although for positive reasons we got the majority of the cycling money that we'd asked for, the drop crossing contribution from the Department of Transport wasn't something that we got. So what we'd done in the paper was on the in the event that happened, that we would then fund the 250,000 from the Transport Capital Programme instead. So what we'll do later on, when we've got the Transport Capital Programme, I'll ask you to accept the report as it is, but we'll make an amendment to the next monitor report, if that's okay, with yourself. So the decision there is just for you to confirm that we. So
the recommendation is in order to prioritise the drop curbs in the city centre, which is that the pedestrian cycle schemes element of transport capital budget has 250,000 budget allocation for this work.
So when we get to the monitor, we'll look at how we reprioritise the walking and cycling schemes within that block. So that's not the clarity, that's not the active travel programme projects, that's the separate part.
The LTP.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yes. Okay. So on that specific point, I'm happy to approve the recommendation, that that funding is allocated to ensure that this is given the priority that we want to see these happen as quickly as we are able to implement that. So that's,
Yeah, so the next one item in the report I was just going to make some comments about was the blue badge parking, the disabled bays and disabled bays in the public car parks. We've got the numbers here and just wanted to be clear that where we identify bays in car parks, they're constantly under review. We're monitoring the usage at the moment of the car parks and the disabled bays. If we see occupations at a high level, we'll then bring back decision in terms of creating more bays in the car park. Just to note also that blue badge parkers are able to park in any car park.
they're allowed to park in any bay, but obviously the ones dedicated ones are more suited to having the space that they need.
Yeah. And there's also still some review work to do at the end of Blake Street, where we talked about in November about investigating the potential for putting some more blue badge spaces in, but that was subject to us getting some more detailed results on the locations of the hostile vehicle measures.
So that's being looked at in relation to the precise location for the hostile vehicle measures.
Yeah. And then I think, unless you wanted to pull any other specifics out, there's a lot of work that we've got ongoing. The grants that we've got for both Shop Mobility and Dial-A-Ride, we expect to imminently pass those to those organisations. We've been working with those organisations on action plans for that. I think that there is there was a comment by one of the public speakers about the size of those grants, and again, if we feel there's more support needed for either of those organisations, we'll bring that back to you for future decision or executive, depending on which is the appropriate channel.
Yeah, obviously we're working closely with the Shop Mobility and Dial-A-Ride. And then just a couple of other points to note. There's reference to a feasibility study of looking at dedicated shuttle service. That, as I understand it, is part of the BSIP, Bus Service Improvement Plan, which we hopefully will be hearing the next few weeks. The outcome.
Based on our original thoughts, the decision on that is probably overdue, but we're obviously waiting for central government to make those announcements. But that's right, we'll start to move forward with that work. Having basically this funding to come with it, and then we can put resources to that project.
So I mean, on that, I mean, it's referenced in paragraph 31, but I think that hopefully could be an exciting new service for everybody, not just people with disabilities. And if we are able to trial something which would cater for that and be able to travel at low speeds through the pedestrian areas, but also address some of those issues. So then the other point I've got was there is reference to the information and the website, which I believe we're updating this week.
It is, yes. So the latest edition of Our City, it hits doormats on the 24th of March, which I think is Thursday, if my maths on the top of my head are right. And along with that, we're also releasing some new pages on the website which will support the city centre access work. We're creating two maps. One is an improved version of the dynamic map on the website, and we're also producing a printable map with features on there for that will guide people towards things like blue badge parking spots, to public toilets and other things like that they might need if they're visiting or resident of the city.
And I mean, some of the other measures will be developed in conjunction with the access officer, and obviously that may take a month or two before that is in post. One of the elements of this which is mentioned is that on paragraph 9, that the statutory, just for, I think it's worth saying for clarity, the statutory consultation on exemptions and waivers other than blue badge holders is underway at the moment. So there are some exemptions, for example, which historically have been there since the foot streets were implemented. So for things like bullion, particular hotels or things like that, which are at the moment being subject to consultation, which will have a report back to myself sometime in May, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's just because I'm aware that one of the concerns is that action's been taken, obviously right since COVID, to remove blue badge parking, but there are other exemptions which are currently in place, but that will be addressed. And then there will also be a consultation on the actual timing of the permanent foot streets arrangements over the summer. That's right. Prior to the end of the COVID provisions, which are until September, the end of September. So I'm happy to note all of those points. I think in response to the public speakers, the decision that was taken in November wasn't an easy one for the executive, and we are this programme of work is very much to acknowledge that the city isn't accessible for all at the moment, and we want to try and make it more accessible for as many people as we possibly can, and that is a commitment which was made right from the outset in November. So the reports coming back to my decision sessions are to give transparency about what action is being taken and to give opportunity, as we've heard today, for representations on things that we can be doing better, and any concerns that people still have that they want to raise. So I think that concludes the item with, as noting the financial decision within that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next report we've got, sorry.
Yeah, and also I should just, it is perhaps just on that last item worth noting Appendix B that has examples of different approaches to providing access, whether it's tables, blended junctions, whatever. There are different approaches that can be taken to improve access, and given the constraints of cellars and historic fabric in our city, we may need to use different approaches in different places. I'm happy with that. So the next item, agenda item 6, is the Coppergate traffic regulation order.
So this is the making permanent of the traffic regulation order to allow the bus traffic in one direction and cycle traffic in two directions with a cycle contra flow. I think the first thing to note in the report is we have now implemented the improved measures on Coppergate, which gives a better segregation for cyclists on the contra flow. We'd had some issues with vandalism and removing of the wands and the cones and other various measures that we've put in place, but the new ones that have been installed have much better. I think we're in a much better place, and I think the decision here is to carry this forward, approve the traffic regulation order to keep this in place. There's been, I think there was a representation from the SAG campaign about making sure that groups are involved in the consultation when we get around to the permanent.
Bus, you mean the outcome of the bus
regulation but we will, after the bus study, we will then review look at what the future is in the context of city centre bus routes and the immediate public realm. So the decision in there is
So on the
sorry.
just on the recommendations, it's basically, it says here to note the improved arrangements for the segregated cycle lane, yes, which I think are very welcome. Certainly in terms of awareness of pedestrians, having a lane actually marked on the road when you have a one-way system, it does help to raise awareness to look out for bicycles and it come in the opposite direction. And the second one is to request officers commence work on the process of formal consultation to make the current arrangements permanent. So that is the legal sort of process, isn't it? Because we've had a number of temporary measures which have started out immediately post-COVID to allow space for social distancing on when this was originally introduced, and to delegate if there are no objections received or report back to a future meeting of this decision. I think, and also request that the bus study outcome, whatever elements of that relate to Coppergate are brought forward for consideration at that future meeting. So I think in terms of the changes that have been made, obviously the initial was one of the temporary measures we brought in post-COVID, but subsequent to that, I think there's probably been a number of unexpected benefits. Because obviously we're aware of the disadvantage to the eastbound bus routes, which is obviously a concern which will be looked at through the bus study. But if there are ways in which that can be mitigated so that it doesn't have particularly detrimental impact on the buses, then there are significant benefits that have been identified, not least the way in which this links to the Castle Gateway scheme, which is hopefully going to open up much more attractive, much busier area of the city around Clifford's Tower and the end of Castlegate. This obviously is or has historically been a bit of a barrier for pedestrian movement between the Coppergate centre and the rest of the city centre. So in the longer term, I would hope that there will be opportunity for public realm works to enhance that and to make it much more of a people-friendly street rather than a traffic-dominated one. But I do also note that there has been inevitably there's a reduction in overall traffic passing through the city centre on that spine, so there have probably been some other benefits in relation to people. For example, the crossings, pedestrian movement between Fossgate and the rest of the city centre, with Stonegate having less, Stonebow having less traffic in general. So there's obviously a number of steps that will be taken. After the formal consultation invites representations on this before we confirm that. So that's the stage we're at now, is because the temporary measure, I think, is due to run out. We need to advertise to make it permanent. I think the extension's agreed and expires on the 14th of June. So I would assume that there will be a report back to one of my decision sessions in May, presumably.
If there are no objections.
I think.
Sorry,
if there are objections.
Sorry.
If there are no
If there are
objections, I'm delegating approval.
That's right. Apologies.
If there are objections, then they will be reported back to a decision session, which probably would have to be May.
Yes.
Okay, so on that basis, I'm happy to approve that going forward. The next item we've got is the capital programme, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So this is the annual report on the transport capital programme, your approval.
Thank you. And do you want to say something about that?
Yeah.
Is there some amendment we need to make?
Yeah, I think in terms of the report as it's presented, what I'm going to recommend is that you, because the information we've got is newer than the reports. If you approve on this basis, then we'll bring an amendment to the next monitor report.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we'll discuss how we reprioritise the funding to the walking cycling LTP funding to accommodate the 254,000 for the drop piece.
Right. So this is the, as you say, the annual capital programme, and I think it's worth noting that as with a lot of things in the staffing is very much underpinned by the capital programme, because we don't get that much central government funding for transport other than the projects that we're progressing. So there's a number of major schemes which are listed from paragraph 6 to 13. I had one question on here. I mean, this obviously is really welcome. Reference to Station Gateway, the Haxby Station, Tadcaster Road, Castle Gateway. There's a number of projects that major projects we're taking forward. There's reference on paragraph 13 to electric vehicle fleet infrastructure, which will complete the installation at Hazel Court Depot and support the upgrade of the council's vehicle fleet to electric vehicles. I believe we've got something at Union Terrace as well, which is coming forward.
The City Centre High Club will come forward.
So is that under a different programme? Or
City Centre High Club is under the High Club works. That's in there, but this is different. This is the funding that, although that some funding will be used for the Union Terrace car park from the fleet budget, because we'll charge fleet there, or there'll be pieces of charging done there. This is about us upgrading our internal infrastructure at Hazel Court to accommodate the switch to electric vehicles or electric fleet.
Okay, now I recognise there's also reference to the funding for 2 new dial-a-ride buses, paragraph 16, which was mentioned earlier, and improvements to park and ride sites.
I think on buses, we'll obviously be able to confirm other elements of work once we get announcements on bus service improvement plan funding.
Yes, obviously a lot of that hinges on that. And then we have we mentioned the pedestrian cycle schemes, which includes a very welcome, I think I want to note already some progress on the review of access barriers, which where we've got funding to progress. Location of safety schemes, local transport plan funded schemes. There's just one question on paragraph 25. It's probably not your area, but I note that bridge maintenance is down. I think my main concern there would be, as it does say, we need to make sure that any bridge maintenance in the city centre takes account of work that's going on elsewhere around the network, so that we can minimise the disruption.
It is. Sits within my area.
Does it?
Okay. Yeah, it does. And we're working with a number of agencies at the moment to look at how we consultants and other bodies to look at how we sort of program that in. But I think there's a key thing about timing around things like the Lenwood Bridge works. But we'll bring that program to you at a future session.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we obviously don't want bits falling off into the river, but we do.
No.
we do need to try and tie it in around what else is going on in the city. And I also note you've got an annex here which has got the active travel programme and the list of all the schemes. These are normally reported on a regular basis, aren't they? With progress to
That's okay. I think we've obviously had the decisions at the February decision session, which has given us further clarity on some of the schemes, so it's allowed us to sort of reprogram. And I think I think there were a couple of comments from public speakers about the pace and priority of this, and I just assure you from our perspective, this is being treated as a high priority, and we're putting a lot of resource to fulfilling this work.
Well, I think acknowledge that since the February meeting, as you said, we've got a clear programme of work, and we can't work on every scheme at the same time. But I think the first tranche are due to come forward in the next month or so. So very much welcome that. I suppose the only thing I was going to say on that, I would try and can we make sure that we've got different columns as a heading, consultation, and then decision. In terms of decisions, they need to be on the forward plan for when we've got a slot. And the designs that are now being worked up will need presumably to be reported back as we progress them. I think that covers all the points I wanted to raise, so I'm happy to approve that. Thank you. I don't have any other business, so I'll let people go for their lunch.
Thanks very much.